Welcome to Graceguts&grit, the podcast about showing up, standing tall, and handling life's plot twists with just the right mix of grace, guts, and grit. No manuals, just real talk and survival strategies. So grab your coffee, your kombucha, whatever fuels you, and let's get into it, because showing up isn't the goal. Showing up boldly, unapologetically, and authentically, that's where the magic is. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to Grace, Guts, and Grit, where we call things what they are and try not to lose our minds or our last good nerve in the process. I'm your host, Oluwakemi, but here, call me Kemi because nobody can pronounce my full name anyway. This brings us to today's topic, tokenism, or as I like to call it, diversity's evil twin. About a decade ago, I walked into a new higher orientation at XYZ Hospital, the only Black woman in a room of matching resumes, none of them expecting a very West African face with a Nigerian accent. The orientation coordinator puts a hand on my shoulder and says, "Kay, we're so glad to have your unique perspective here." And then he turns to the group and adds, "Let's make sure we hear from Kay today." I should also mention that I was the only one introduced by the first letter of her nickname. Everyone else was Dr. Johnson, Dr. James, Dr. this and that. It wasn't just the words, it was how they shrank my role before I'd even spoken. And instead of allowing me to blend in peace or even acknowledged for my clinical experience, I was pre-framed as the unique perspective. It wasn't a recognition of value, it was a reminder that I was there to represent difference. That phrase, unique perspective, it says you belong here as a token. Because really, real inclusion doesn't announce your wild difference from the pack. It integrates you quietly, seamlessly, without the harsh spotlights. I mean, it still makes me chuckle till today. Let me put it this way. If you've ever been introduced as our Black doctor, our Nigerian doctor, our Black hire, instead of our new internist, our new staff member, congratulations, you're a token. If the hospital newsletter has featured your face 7 times, but somehow skipped you for leadership, you've been tokenized. If you're expected to speak for all Black people, all immigrants, all women, and bonus round, all Black immigrant women, yeah, welcome to the club. Tokenism reminds me of that moment when I made a data-backed, clinically sound point and was met with silence. A bit later, Brad repeats it. Let's call him Brad. And cue the applause. It was deafening. That's tokenism. The great idea, but only when Brad says it. And when I brought this up, I was told, well, he said it with more confidence. Now here's the wild part. Tokenism is DEI's evil twin. It's what happens when companies or institutions or corporations care more about the look of inclusion than the infrastructure of equity. Like Target hit the panic button. They scaled back DEI programs with whiplash speed and then played shocked when the backlash rolled in. You can't hawk Black girl magic mugs and, magically want to disappear the Black girl magicians. That's just irrational. Meanwhile, Costco said, "We like diversity and its dividends." And they meant it. So when conservative shareholders tried to gut their DEI work, 98% of investors rejected the proposal. Revenue grew, loyalty was solid, and it turns out respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion, it doesn't hurt your bottom line. So yeah, the DEI theater, we see you. If the people you're marketing to don't feel safe in your workspace, it's not diversity, it's empty branding. Look, I didn't grind through a second residency just to be your Black MD at work. I'm not a checkbox who's just dabbling lightly in medicine. And while I can rant about this, I'm going to pivot to the data. Let's talk about the research. So McKinsey and Leanin in 2023, the Women in Workplace report, for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 87 women are. And just 73 for women of color. And for leadership, from 2020 till now, the percentage of women of color in the C-suite crept from 4% to, wait for it, a whopping 5%. That's not progress. That seems like mere rounding error. Also, the Pew Research Center in 2023 said half of Black professionals say they have had to work harder than their colleagues just to be respected. And the numbers back this up. Performance reviews for Black employees, it's more likely to critique your tone, your attitude, or your approach, rather than your actual skills. Translation, it's not paranoia, it's a pattern. And then the American Psychological Association, the APA, they call it chronic racial stress. The symptoms are insomnia, burnout, elevated cortisol, hypertension. I like to call it tokenism stress. But the definition is still the same. Being the only one in the room isn't just demoralizing, it's a health risk. And that's a quote from the APA. And in 1995, Jackson et al. Conducted a study that found that being the only leads to relentless scrutiny, pressure to overperform, and a constant fear of confirming stereotypes. It's not imposter syndrome, it's just survival math. Now think about it, that was in 1995, 30 years ago. And it's still a very present issue till today. In 2020, Mary Frances Winters gave it a name, Black fatigue. And she describes exactly what we live, the cumulative toll of code switching, hypervigilance, and having to read the room before we even speak. It doesn't just wear you down, it breaks you down mentally, emotionally, and physiologically. Like when I worked at a major health insurer, my boss wrote in my evaluation, my annual evaluation. She's a skilled clinician, excellent with data analytics. But then she gave me 25% of my bonus, despite meeting all the metrics that qualified me for a minimum of 80% of my bonus. And she told me in person, "You're too new to get 100%, maybe next year." Those were her actual words. And so I thought to myself, so what's the point of the metrics? What's the point of you having me do all this work and check off all these boxes if it's still going to boil down to your opinion of me as a newbie? Just an utter waste of time. Or what about the time I was asked to serve on a congestive heart failure panel in the hospital? And that was about my 5th panel. I showed up with research-backed data with actionable points. And I was met with actual silence. Silence, nothing was said, no acknowledgement of my hard work. But the next week, the CMD, who was on the same committee, presents my framework as his vision for the department moving forward. To deafening applause, tokenism at its finest. You can be sure I thanked him very, very nicely for his impressive ability to repurpose and disseminate my ideas. Now let's play the tokenism bingo. Have you been told, we don't see color here? What about you're so articulate? Oh my goodness. How about, can you just explain racism to the team real quick? And my favorite one is, you're not like the others. Bonus points if they whisper that to you. So what do we do about this? Because, I'm not just here to diagnose. I'm a doctor after all. Let's talk treatment. For organizations that want to do better, I'm looking at you, hospital administration and corporate leaders. First, you have to focus on creating environments where people can bring their full, authentic selves to work. And that means addressing systemic barriers to advancement, not just focusing on recruitment. Second, if your team photo looks like Where's Waldo of diversity, you need to start again. Third, pay attention to retention, not just hiring. If your diverse employees are leaving faster than you can say Jack Robinson, you've got a culture problem, not a pipeline problem. Fourth, measure your outcomes, not just your intentions. We don't care about your beautiful DEI statement if your leadership team still looks like a country club in 1952. Think about it. And finally, you need to listen more than you talk. If you've invited us to your diversity committee, but you're doing all the talking, you've already missed the point. Now, for my people in the struggle, for all of us out there who've been tokenized, who've had to smile through microaggressions, and who've been asked, but where are you really from, for the 1,000th time? First, you have to build your community. Find your people, inside and outside of your workplace. I know my text group of other Black female physicians have preserved my peace more times than I can count. Second, set boundaries around your emotional and cultural labor. Being asked to educate colleagues on racism or represent your entire cultural background is unpaid labor. And it's okay to say, no, that's not my job. But if you want to step in graciously into the void, feel free to ask for compensation because it is work. Third, document accomplishments. Every extra assignment, every time you went above and beyond, because your work will not automatically speak for itself. And you know why? Because bias shouts louder. And finally, protect yourself. Practice radical self-care. Protect your energy, your time, and your boundaries. Because here's the truth. Tokenism demands grace from those who've been denied it, guts from those already exhausted, and grit from those who've had to work twice as hard to prove they belong for half the credit. But your value is not in being the only one. It's in being exactly who you are. Complex, resilient, brilliant, your whole self. In the next segment, we're going to be joined by Dr. Mo. She's the chief of surgery, obstetrician powerhouse, institutional reformer, and a low-key icon. She's a force to be reckoned with. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back to Graceguts&grit. Today we're here with Dr. Mo. We're going to be talking about when you're the only person of color, the only woman, and how do you navigate all that? Today's guest has broken a lot of barriers. She's been the chief of surgery, chief of OB. She's a well-regarded surgeon in her field of practice in both the United States and Canada. Welcome, Dr. Mo.
Thank you, Kemi. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
All right. Why don't we dive in? My first question is, did you know that your path will require not just excellence, but armor? Being the only person of color and being the only female, or both in the room?
So my background is I'm proudly Nigerian, and medical school was, as we are well aware in Nigeria, right from the get-go, you're at ward round in your ward coat and your patient is like, nurse. So there's all of that you are dealing with right from the outset. And for a lot of us, it helped us to build resilience. But you still didn't quite understand the scope of what you were getting yourself into when you leave your country and you go abroad to study. So that first round where people look at you like, why are you here? And you don't look like us, you don't talk like us, your name is unpronounceable. It's a bit of a culture shock. And learning to navigate that was extremely difficult and challenging because nobody really talks about it. Everybody talks about racism, but in a general manner. You don't quite understand how it's going to impact you in your place of work until you're there.
True. And so how do you think you were able to build armor, and what else helped you prepare? Maybe anything in your childhood?
I think all these little building blocks, like being female and wanting to be a doctor, and all those little things that you do to build resilience. So, of course, it comes with, number one, making up your mind to succeed. That sounds easy, but odds are stacked against you. So learning that resilience, and I have to credit some of it was the feral way that they raised us in our medical school, with all those domineering, hypercritical consultants that sort of treated you like you were something stuck under their shoe.
True.
It all helped to build a bit of a thick skin.
So that armor we're talking about.
Yes. It was forged in fire. It sort of gave you that I've been through worse. But it was also different because, we were still amongst our own, amongst our tribe, so to speak. So even though medical school was challenging, we were all a group of these young, idealistic people that would, commiserate, comfort each other. But then when you go abroad, you're suddenly isolated. And I think that was the most painful part. You're isolated. You don't have that tribe around you. And you wonder, wait a minute, did that really happen? am I overthinking this? Did they really
Yeah.
know me? Or
Yeah. Well, I think you're actually going into our next question, which is when you entered your surgical residency, as I think you were maybe the only Nigerian in your class, what did that feel like? Was it a sense of isolation or more of your pioneering spirit?
so I would say it was a mixture of both. I was the only Nigerian in my
Okay.
set. There was another person that was of African descent. And then the last person in my cohort was also an immigrant. And it was very interesting because I didn't realize the last member of our cohort had done a residency before and was a very, very skilled surgeon, very skilled surgeon. And at first, I assumed that all the talking down and all of that was because I wasn't such a skilled surgeon. And so for the first year, I sort of allowed these things to happen, is the way I would put it, because I kept rationalizing it and saying, oh, okay, maybe it's because of this, maybe. And we all do that as, you don't want to stir the pot. You are the immigrant, you are new, and we're just sort of trained to take a lot of abuse before we speak out. But as I advanced through the training, especially, I had a moment when I was in second year and I saw how one of the attendings that had always been very dismissive and very condescending to me was treating my junior, who looked like them, was so patient and so. And I was like, are you kidding me?
So you
That
can be like this, sir.
you mean you can be human? You mean you're actually capable of talking in like a normal way? I had to stand up for myself. So that was for me a turning point. And at that point, I was like, no, it is not okay for people to treat me like this. It is not okay for them to be condescending, to act like I don't matter, like my voice doesn't matter, regardless of the color of their skin or gender they profess. So that was the turning point of my life.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, tell us, were there moments where you just felt you had to jump into the void to be more extra because you were the person of color, the woman surgeon in the room? How was that at the beginning of your career in the United States? And how is it going now?
At the beginning, everybody sort of they underestimate you. And at first that always used to upset me. But I found a way to turn it into a strength. Now when I go into a room and I feel like people are like dismissing me, I smile under my, in my head because I'm like, oh, you don't know what's coming for. I've turned it into a weapon. It's my secret superpower. Nobody sees me coming. So I've learned to use that as a tool. Like I can't change people's perception. I can't change prejudices. I can't legislate how somebody will look at me and how they'll think about me when I walk in. But I can make sure that the next time you see a person of color who is female, you think twice because you remember me. And that's what I strive to do now because there's no point kicking against the goat. Some people are not going to change. They
I
will
hear
look
you. I
and
hear.
feel like you're less than. So you just have to.
That's one thing that also had to realize that my job is not to manage your doubt. My job is to be so undeniable that your doubt becomes irrelevant.
And that's what I realized as well, Kevin. But I don't have to prove anything to you. I just have to keep bringing my A game on. And really, really, I have what it takes. And once you get to that place of confidence and that place of knowing that you matter. And again, the other thing I realized, for the first few years, I used to try to be the good Black person, You understand what I mean? Like, I felt like I carried the race on my head. And I'm like, no, part of the privilege that I enjoy is the privilege to be an individual.
Exactly.
You fail as an individual, not your whole race. I stopped letting that also trap me because that's also a cage. I rise or fall on my own merit.
There's a tendency for institutions to, when they have you in the room as maybe the only female, only person of color, they tend to look to you as the author and finisher of all things pertaining to that race or gender. I'm here as a professional with a caveat, with the understanding that you being there is going to be a door for someone else like you to come in, but it doesn't mean that you're here to represent the entire Black or female community.
Absolutely. And while I have no problems representing them, I do not want my failures to be a representation of my race. No, no. We also have a right to be here. We also have a right to be treated as individuals. And that is all that I'm fighting for. And I think that, there are multiple layers of that. Like I said, I'm proudly Nigerian. I am proudly Black. Yoruba, proudly everything.
Everything. So what you're saying is when you're the only one, you get to be there on your own terms.
Yes.
You're not standing for the entire race, culture, or continent. And you letting go of that expectation from other people has freed you to be yourself and to succeed even more.
Absolutely. Because I found that cross, that burden was actually limiting me, If I say this, I sound like the angry Black woman. But now I'm like, no. If I say this and you think I sound like that's on you.
That's on
I'm
you.
just letting you know how I feel. So all of those things that were actually expectations and little cages that they put on you, I was like, no, 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 Satan.
All right. So the next question is, which I think you already kind of touched on. Do you think you've had to break down the door or did they just let you in? How did that work out?
You know what, Kemi? Excellence speaks for itself. And so I will not try to do the Nigerian humility thing. I'm good at what I do, and I've always honed my skills. So at first, people may look down, but it becomes clear after a while. And once I started to assert myself and allowed myself to have a voice and allow that voice to ring out, because nobody can stop you but you.
But you.
Yes, you can allow them to convince you to be less than.
I see what you're saying.
Yes. So even from residency, from being the administrative chief resident, it was
You were the clear choice.
it was a yes. And then after that, I finished residency. I went into work and I took some leadership roles. But a lot of that, even then, when I had first started my job, I had the opportunity to be the chair and I declined because I felt I was still young as an attending and I really wanted to get my feet wet. I regretted that decision for a long time. Have somebody not as competent
as you running the show
is not a good place to be. So if you have the opportunity, just do it. Just do it. After that, that crystallized it in my head that, look, if you have a gift for doing something well, then do it and leave the place a little better for those coming after you.
Sometimes we feel we're not up to the task, but we need to realize that the people who are asking, they see something in you that maybe you don't see. Because I remember too, when I was at my first employed job in Dallas, when the chief of the program left, I was asked to step in and be the program director. And at that time, I said, no, I don't think I want to be a program director. And I tell you, that was one of the greatest mistakes I've ever made as a professional. And it got to a point when I would complain. My hubby said, but Kemi, you were asked to fill this role and you declined it. That is on you.
Exactly. So that is exactly what propels me. Like, leave this place a little better for the people coming behind. And sometimes you have competing priorities. But in the absence of that, if you can do it, then do it.
Do it for you and do it for people coming behind you. You can be of great service. And I know some of the things you're doing now that you've been able to do for other people who wouldn't have gotten opportunities they are getting now if not for you advocating for them. And that's something to be commended.
Yes. And honestly, that's the reason I do what I do. And I will continue to do what I do as long as God gives me the strength.
My next question is, what's one thing that you used to apologize for that you now protect fiercely with pride?
There was a fourth year person who told me once that I answer too many questions. And so I was like, oh my God, do they think I'm showing off? Because we used to have these rounds every day at 6 a.m. and they will ask questions and I will answer. I think that really, really used to rub her the wrong way. So I sort of started to not say anything. And fortunately, I still have a wonderful relationship with my program director. And he called me and he was like, hey, you're not participating in the morning rounds anymore. And I was like, doctor, so and so said. And so he was like, never, ever let somebody do that to you. Okay? This has been the best thing that has happened to this program. You've been here, and he just really encouraged me and told me. And that really just opened my eyes. And then I was like, what are you doing, really? Like, why would you
why are you letting this person silence you?
Exactly.
That's one of the things I tell my children and anyone I'm mentoring. Do not let anyone convince you to shrink yourself for their own comfort.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a big part for women of color, for women, for immigrants, because sometimes your excellence and your presence is just very threatening.
Absolutely.
So, on to the final question. Now, when you walk into a room and you still find yourself the only female, the only person of color, what would be your final word to people that are coming behind you with similar credentials, immigrants, women of color?
I will tell them that it's okay to be the one to break the glass ceiling. It's okay to go there, be the only one, and do such a good job that the people coming after you have an easier time of it. It's okay to be that person that makes it okay, that normalizes people of color, that normalizes having a female in the room. Just be you, and you are great. Be your awesome self, and you don't even have to work that hard to shatter that ceiling. It's a low-hanging fruit.
Thank you so much for being a part of our show, and we hope to work more with you and hear more from you in the future, because you do have a lot to share as far as experience and insight into navigating these spaces as a woman of color.
All right. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Mo, for joining us. We appreciate your insight. And before we wrap, if you feel like the token in your workplace, you are not imagining it. You are not too sensitive. And no, you weren't hired because of your identity. You were hired in spite of that being an obstacle in the corporate world. It makes you extraordinary. So next time someone asks you why you're so emotional about being the only one, about being tokenized, tell them, I'm not emotional. I'm epidemiologically concerned. This is a public health crisis. And while they're figuring things out, you keep showing up as your brilliant, boundary-honoring, burnout-resistant self. This is Kemi, your favorite Nigerian immigrant woman doctor, signing off. And until next week, keep your heads high and your boundaries higher. So that's it for today's episode of Graceguts&Grit. If something resonated with you, made you laugh, made you think, or made you say, whew, I needed that, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, Grace keeps it classy, Guts takes the risk, and Grit gets it done. And you, my friend, were built for this. So, see you next time, same place, same energy. Until then, keep showing up and owning your story.